I think it could be very tempting for artists to be like, oh yeah, I like recording with them because I get to actually go to like this big studio that costs a lot of money, and like they have all these studio musicians that bring in. It's like none of that actually means a ton.
It could be a producer, but they could just be a beat maker who doesn't really know how to produce.
No producer should be afraid of people asking around. Like if you do really good work, you should be proud of how your clients feel about working with you.
So if they have no interest in getting to know your vision or know what you're trying to make the song be, already I hate to use the word red flag, but that is a red flag.
Dude, we are talking about something super fun today, which is producers. The main idea is we don't want you to get ripped off from a producer. We've seen it happen a lot of times, and we want you to find the right producer. So we're going to look out for some red flags. And we're going to look out for some green flags and try to make a good decision, and then maybe what you can do when you're in a bad spot. So before we go on, can you please define what a producer is?
Yes. I think a producer often gets defined as many different things, because I think people get on Instagram and they see somebody making beats and they're like, that's a producer. And they could be a producer, but they could just be a beat maker who doesn't really know how to produce. And so producing is, or I should say, a producer is somebody that is overseeing the makeup and the instrumentation and honestly helping you execute the overall vision of your song as you imagine it should be in its final product. So a producer is taking what is likely your voice memo or your basic demo of the song, and they're taking it from that all the way through to instrumentation, adding piano, bass, electric guitar, drums, and that's just like a basic framework, but it could be any other thing. It could be strings. And they're taking it, adding instrumentation to it, and even holding your hand through the next couple of steps, which is mixing and mastering as you're working with other engineers to make sure. So they act as like a liaison, an advocate for you as you're working with a whole team of people to finish your song, to make it ready for release. That's the job of a producer. And so that is like the chief role of a producer. A producer can play that role in different ways and contribute to that in different ways. So a producer can play on instruments, like, and nowadays they probably should, just given like the level of competency that most producers have. But I know producers that don't play any instruments at all, and they're still doing that job of overseeing the song and making sure it's a quality product.
I know sometimes depending on the song, like you'll play all the instruments. Like you'll do the keys, but you'll program some drum stuff. You'll do that. But then other projects, you're like, hey, I'm going to contract out guitarists and drummers, and I'm going to cast a vision for them and help get what the artist wants. So I think that's interesting too. I also know, like, I feel like sometimes people think they have a producer, but they don't. Like sometimes you think just because you went to a studio, you have a producer. But they're actually not really contributing anything. They're just kind of like hit and record. And I know I've mixed projects like that where it's like, yeah, this song's supposed to sound like Ben Rector. I'm like, you have like 2 instruments in here. Like, I don't like, I guess your producer didn't help you like flesh out the song. Maybe you didn't want it, but yeah, you can tell when someone didn't really have a producer. They just had an engineer on it.
And we've also had a lot of friends that have been ripped off by producers, or the producer just didn't deliver what they wanted. And they get to the end of the song, they did all the things and gave them a product, but they're super not happy with it. And what's worse, because it's one thing to be not happy with it, it's another to tell that to your producer, and the producer's not willing to help you get it to what you want it to be. And we don't want that for people.
Yeah, I know when I've had people in that situation, they kind of come adjacently to me of like, hey, I'm in this process. I'm not really stoked about it. Honestly, there's not much you can do.
Candidly.
You can have them hand it off to another producer, and then you kind of get like this Frankenstein project, which usually people still aren't like super stoked about. But this is why.
I've seen people try that, and I've never seen people do that and be like, I'm so glad I Frankensteined it. And like,
I think they're glad that they finish it elsewhere.
Yes.
But they're still like, man, there's so much I would have done differently. You know?
Yeah.
And so that's why what we want to do is help artists on the front end to see some qualities and maybe make a better decision on the front end.
Yeah.
Because once you're in it, you're kind of in it, and then maybe you just cut ties and you move on.
For sure.
And you have some more knowledge and information, but we want to help people not make those mistakes. So that's going to be the heartbeat of what we talk about. So we have a bunch of things specifically that we kind of listed out that we kind of talk about. Oh, this would be fun to talk about.
Yeah.
I think when talking about these things, it's important to remember that all of these points add up to a full picture.
Yeah.
So just because a producer does one of these things well or doesn't do one of these things well doesn't mean like, oh yeah, yes or no.
Right. It's not black and white.
Yeah, it's not black and white. This is like a full picture of a person. And so if there's multiple things that you're like, ooh, that's multiple red flags, you should be asking questions of like, okay, is this the right person? If there's multiple green flags, you're like, okay, I feel better about it. So you're kind of like, you're either with each of these things adding confidence or taking it away.
Yeah.
And then you're at the end of the picture, you're like, how much do I have of this? Yep. So holistically, this is about trust. It's very interesting to talk about trust. You're trusting this other person. You're entering this relationship where you're giving them money.
Right.
You're hoping to get back a product.
Yeah.
And you're trusting that they're going to steward that really well, that they're going to be encouraging along the way, and that they're going to help you win for what your vision is.
And steward your personal art.
Your personal art.
That's very tight to you. It's like you want to keep it with, trusting that with somebody else is really hard to do in general.
Yep.
So how do they remove all of these roadblocks of trust that you might have already by being a good person, good producer?
Yep. So I think one of the first things is like, where do you even start? I think most people start with like wanting to find a producer through their friends. So like asking around other artists. Like I think a great question too is not just like looking at the quality of work in the end, but asking artists, hey, who did you like working with? Who did you love working with that you're going to work with again? And I think artists will be very honest. Like if they had a bad experience and they felt like they wasted money or got ripped off, they're not going to go send you to that person.
Right.
So I think that's a great question to ask. I think also you've always done this, like you do a good job looking up song credits and like finding producers. I think if you do that, my only concern would be don't just like look up one album and say, oh, the producer produced that. I want that producer.
Right.
Actually start reaching out to some other artists that they've produced for. It's kind of like job references.
Yeah.
And just be like, hey, I know you worked with so-and-so on this project. Can you tell me about that experience? I'm thinking about hiring them. Is there anything I should know?
Yeah.
Again, I think that's totally fair. No producer should be afraid of people asking around. Like if you do really good work, you should be proud of how your clients feel about working with you.
Yeah.
So I think like listening to catalogs is really good. I think also for styles, like if you want to jump into that, like how does someone listen to a catalog? What if you don't have styles that match that producer? What if you do? How do you view that?
Yeah. So I think it's very nuanced because there are styles that I'm fully capable of doing that I just haven't been presented the opportunity of being able to do yet.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I would say look at holistically their catalog. See if they're able to dive into a variety of genres. Also, it starts with you first knowing what genre you want to do in the first place.
That's true. Yeah.
So when you bring your song, when you have a demo, like have an idea, have your own thoughts and your own vision and your own reference. I know that's really, really hard for artists to do. When you don't play instruments, you're not a producer, and that's why you're hiring a producer to help you come up with a vision. But have an idea of like who inspires you, what style, what instruments, what genre inspires you, and then hold that up against, and I say this with a grain of salt, hold that up against what you've seen them do and say, do I think they're capable of doing this thing? And so, yeah, I would say listen to their catalog, see what inspires you, see if they're working with other artists that are similar to you. Trying to think of other things.
I think asking too, like, hey, do you have anything close to this genre?
Yeah.
Seeing if they have variety. Because I know even for me, I think a lot of people assume I only mix like indie Christian stuff because that's kind of one of the bigger genres that I have a lot of music in, which is great. I love it. And then someone asks me a question, I'm like, oh, I've done rock stuff. I've done rap stuff. I've done, especially with TV and film, I've done like literally everything. Yeah. So I think asking and looking for that variety.
Right.
Now, if you're looking at a producer and the only thing they've ever done is like movie film scores.
Yeah. Or hip hop beats.
And your genre is like nowhere adjacent to that.
Yeah.
I'd start to like ask some really hard questions. And if you're not getting those answers, that would be a red flag for me. But I think the variety piece is important.
Yeah. And I think I'm thankful for artists that have like just taken the risk of asking me, hey, are you capable?
Yeah.
Because I think my catalog with a lot of female artists as over the last few years has been very singer-songwriter, acoustic, sappy.
Yep.
And so I had an artist, she was like, hey, I'm looking for something like more R&B, like soul.
Yeah.
Which is, I love doing.
Yes, yeah.
But I only
You just don't have a big catalog.
Yeah, because I hadn't been presented the opportunity. And I was like, you should know, I would be so excited to do that.
Yep.
Thank you for asking me and making sure and not just looking at my catalog and assuming I only do singer-songwriter stuff.
Yeah.
Because that would have sucked.
Yeah.
So
I also think a good producer can look at a genre and figure out how to make it work really well with the pieces they have. So again, like I know recently you're working on a project that's, I wouldn't say Band Camino, but more the Band Camino, more like Knox, that kind of vibe.
Yeah.
It's not something you have a lot in your catalog, but you know the right musicians to give you that sound.
Yeah.
And you know what to look for when like diving into a genre. So
For sure.
I think you're going to crush that genre, but it's only because you have the right people around you.
Yeah.
If you didn't have the right guitarists and the right drummers around you, like there'd be no shot that you're going to end up with that sound, I feel like.
Yeah. And maybe those instrumentalists, those people aren't in your immediate proximity of relationships, but the producer needs to know how to make that connection of reaching out to, you mentioned earlier before the podcast, a steel guitarist. Yeah. And I was like, I don't know a steel guitarist, but I'm certain I know somebody who does.
Yep.
Oh wait, I actually do know one.
There we go.
So a producer needs to know how to network with people on your behalf.
Yep.
Because that's already hard enough for you to do. You're already doing the hard work as an artist of reaching out to the producer in the first place. They need to carry it the rest of the way.
Yep. I think another just really good thing to look for in a producer is communication. You're going to be doing a lot of communication back and forth.
Yeah.
Especially whenever you do any business transaction.
Yes.
You want to be able to like reach the person and feel like they're invested in it and they're not just giving you short answers, but they're actually like fully communicating with you.
Yeah.
So red flag, if they're not communicating, if they're not quick to communicate, if they're not communicating clearly, if they're communicating in a way that rubs you the wrong way, like any of those things, like just work with someone that's willing to communicate with you, I think goes a very long way.
Yeah. Yep. Communication is super important.
Yeah. I think that also helps paint the picture of like, do you even like them as a person?
Right.
Which I think people might get a little off-put of like, oh, I'm just hiring them for like a service, but this person's going to be working adjacent with you on your art the whole way through. If you don't really like them, that's kind of a big deal.
Or if you feel they don't like you.
Or if, because you're going to have hard conversations. You're going to have to go back and forth. There's going to have to be a lot of trust. You're also going to have to spend time in proximity. Like you don't want to be in a studio or in a house recording with someone that you don't like. It's also really hard. Like if you care passionately about what you're singing, to be in a space that you don't feel comfortable in because of someone's presence there.
For sure.
So I do think there's some give and take. Like we have to all work on our relationships and how we manage those, but you should like who you're working with.
Yeah. This may be so not right to think of it this way. And you're scared hearing me say that.
I'm never scared.
But it is kind of like dating a little bit. You have to find the right match, like somebody that you jive with, somebody that you click with, and somebody that you can work really creatively with and be free to speak your mind as it is. Otherwise, it's just not going to be a good creative process.
Yeah. And there's some grace. I think whenever you start a relationship, especially like a business one where you're trying to get vision across from one person to another, there's gonna sometimes be a little bit of like, okay, like I'm trying to figure out what you mean by that.
Right.
That doesn't mean like, oh, they can't figure it out first try, they're gone.
Sure.
Sometimes you have to work a little bit. And
Absolutely.
Some of my like longest standing clients that I work the most with, it's because we worked together for so long that at this point, I know exactly what they want when they ask.
Yeah.
And they really love that. That was not the case the first time we worked together. So I do think whenever you're working with someone, there's going to be some of that learning curve.
Yeah. And once again, I'm thankful for the artists, not just on my behalf, but on the behalf of their music, that they stuck it out with me.
Yep.
And we figured it out together because it ended up being a really beautiful, sweet partnership.
Yep.
So.
Yep. But at some point, if it's just never clicking.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And so speaking of communication, I think, remember, if the chief goal of a producer is to carry out the vision of your song, they need to be really communicative with you initially on the front end in the conversation before the thing about what your vision is. So your producer needs to be very intentional about asking you questions and getting in your mind. Because as a producer, again, I'm trying to pull like what's in your mind out into reality. But I can't do that unless I'm seeking to understand what your vision for your art is. And so if they have no interest in getting to know your vision or know what you're trying to make the song be, already that I hate to use the word red flag, but that is a red flag. Because the reality is, I think a producer or really anybody working with you on the song, they're gonna have their own thoughts and their own ideas. They should. They should. And then in that sense, it should be a collaborative process between you and the producer, between your thoughts and theirs, your ideas and theirs. But at the end of the day, they are working for you. You hired them. You're paying them money, and you get the final say. And so when I'm a producer for a song and I'm in a spot where there's tension between me and the artists, I consider myself a consultant for the song. Where if it's I think this is not as common as like I may make it out to be, but it does happen where I think the artist makes a choice for the song that I think is flagrantly not helpful. And so I'll raise my hand and say, hey, I do not think we should do that. I think that's not helpful. I think that'll push us back and not help the song progress. But I will try it. And so there's this idea called show, don't tell that a friend put me onto, where if an artist throws out an idea, I think the rule of thumb is you always want to try it. You always want to see.
You might be honest and speak about it on the front end,
initially,
but then you're going to still present the idea.
Yes. And like, give it your best go. Give it your best go as if you believed the idea with them was going to work. Even though I really don't. And so give it my best go. And I'm often surprised that like when I do that, I'm like, oh, this works. And when it doesn't work, the artist is usually like, yeah, that didn't work, but thank you for trying. I really, really appreciate that.
And I think it builds some equity too. Again, you're building that picture of trust with someone.
So at the end of the day, like, or even if like you and I have to make these really hard decisions all the time of like, even if we do it, we still don't feel like it's a good idea, but the artist is like, I really, really want it. I'm like, okay, you've got it. It's your song. I'm not going to be happy about it, but I have to become subservient to that and submit to that to honor them well because it's their music. So.
Yeah, I think there's that. Again, this all contributes to whether you like someone too, but like they have to be honest, but also not a jerk about it. I think that's just something like musicians, producers, anybody, we can be very critical. And so I think red flags for me on that too are like, do they just trash everybody else in town? Do they trash all this other work? Like, they should still be kind, but also be honest. And I think you can sense when someone is being honest with you, but kind at the same time. So
say what you mean what you say, but don't be mean when you say it.
Hey, look at you. Okay, something else. People might try to evaluate the right producer. Based on things like the gear they have or the studio space. And I think it's very important for artists to hear that you're going to get great quality from people based on their experience and their skill. Not the gear they have or the physical space they have. I think it could be very tempting for artists to be like, oh yeah, I like recording with them because I get to actually go to like this big studio that costs a lot of money. And like they have all these studio musicians that bring in. It's like none of that actually means a ton. It can. And so they're not saying those things are bad. There's some producers that work in huge studios with tons of nice gear. But there's also a ton of amazing producers that don't. That they just work in bedrooms or home studios. There's so much you can do with technology now that's really good. And I think why that's such a big deal to us is we've just seen people go to studios and have such a bad experience. And they pay so much money and they think they're going to get a quality product, but at the end of it, they didn't. And that just like hurts. And so you don't know how those people got that studio. It's not because they grinded and worked and they have a ton of experience that they got it. It could be, any number of reasons that they fell into having that studio or managing it. And so I think don't be confused on where quality comes from. It doesn't come from those flashy things. It's going to come from the experience and skill that a producer brings.
For sure. And I think that the process for making and building a song can look so many different ways. I think I've talked to people that are like, well, how can we do a full band song in a bedroom? And it's like, we're not going to.
Yep.
But I do know people that have a drum studio that we could go to on a given day.
You can contract them virtually.
Yes. That doesn't mean I, as the producer, have to own a full-size studio.
Yep.
And so, again, you have to be thinking critically, like, what is the final product going to be?
Mm-hmm.
And also the experience can be really good.
Yep.
Like, let's just even stick to the example of drums. We can do that any number of ways. It could be remotely, where we're not really necessarily in the room, where we're not seeing it happen in real time, but we could trade. I know drummers that would trade drafts of me several times a day if we really needed it.
Yeah.
We could be virtually like watching them drum and like get on a Zoom call and hear quality sounding drums remotely, and it's as if we were in the room. Or we could go to a drum studio for the day.
Yeah.
And I know we talk about Frankenstein-esque songs between like different producers. It would not be a Frankenstein-esque thing if you did it any one of those ways, or if I had a bass player remotely sending me tracks, because the producer is supposed to be the glue that is overseeing your vision for the song. That's their job. That doesn't need to be in a massive studio with all this equipment.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And let's just be honest. We don't have massive studios.
No.
We don't have massive gear.
This is a massive studio.
This is pretty awesome. We're blessed to have the things that we do have.
Yeah.
But the reason why we've had songs that have been so successful, landed on big playlists and like gotten a lot of like attention is not because of studios and gear. It's because of the work that we put in it, the skills that we have, the care that we have for the project, and honestly, like talented songwriters. Yeah. Like it's all a piece of the puzzle. So we're not saying that because we're anti that.
Yeah.
We just...
Oh, no, I love working in a studio.
Yeah,
it's fun.
It's fun, yeah. There's a place for all of it.
For sure.
And there's some projects, it's like, it's great just to send it off and have a drummer send you back amazing quality drums like that.
Yeah. But even like the people that I think a lot of us are most inspired by, like John Bellion.
Yeah.
But I'm sure I could throw out any number of names that are in that realm of celebrity.
Yeah.
And they're not like super excited to go into a massive studio all the time. A lot of them aren't. Like they would rather work from home.
Yeah.
And then if they get to a studio because they need to be, like, that's fine.
Yeah.
But people who have access to all the studios in the world and can do whatever they want are still choosing to work in their homes.
Yep.
And that says something.
Yep.
Again, massive studios aren't bad. It is to say the playing field is more level than it's ever been, and quality music can be made from anywhere.
Yeah. You should fact check me on this if you're listening at home, because I'm going to say a story that I'm pretty sure is true, but you can fact check me. I'm pretty sure Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters had a whole album that I think they spent $1 million producing in a studio, and he trashed the whole thing and re-recorded the whole thing in his house.
That's wild.
And that was the album that went live.
That's nuts.
And yeah, it's a pretty wild story.
Yeah. I mean, when I was at school and I had access to the $2 million studio.
Yeah.
It's like, it was cool, but it wasn't necessary all the time.
You still did stuff in your dorm.
Yeah.
You still did stuff in other places. Yeah. You still contracted out people from other places.
It's like, do I want to record vocals at home today or in the studio?
Yeah.
Probably at home.
Yeah.
Just, today.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyways.
Awesome. Shameless plug.
Yeah.
We do producing. It's a big part of what we do.
We do.
Our goal for this podcast is to really help artists. So we don't want to have these conversations and then at the end of every single one be like, okay, we told you all this information, now just hire us.
Right.
Like, we respect that, like, you might want to work with other producers and there could be a ton of reasons for that. That's totally cool. We want to empower you to make really good decisions as an artist. That's our goal. These are also standards that we try to live by. We try our best. We try to get feedback all the time from artists and how we can improve and how we can grow.
Yeah, I fall short a lot.
And there's going to be lots of times like, we're going to keep growing and figuring stuff out and getting better and better at giving the best service and quality product to people that we possibly can. So again, this is a service we do, but also it's something we want to help people get better at spotting and finding the right producer on their own.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
Is there anything else?
I don't know. I mean, I think if you want a really easy thing, just hire us.
Yeah.
That's the easiest thing. Or ask us.
Yeah.
I think too, even going back to being honest, if someone were to ask you like, hey, can you produce this? And you really weren't sure if you could.
Yeah. I would tell them.
You would tell them and you say, hey, I think this person might be really good for it.
Yeah. And I have done that before.
Yeah. And that's okay.
Yeah.
So reach out. If you have any questions about producers or thoughts, please reach out to us. Let us know. If you think there's anything we missed on this list, hey, let us know.
Yeah. Tweet.
Tweet. Okay. You can figure out a way to cut that.